what you saw was the impact of one man. What one man did affected the whole kingdom. So when these pastors get up here and they say stuff, crazy stuff on the pulpit of food, they don't just look at that one man. A lot of times these folks say, look at these Christians.
Bro, it's only in the last 2 years what God has wrung out of me, bro. It's all of the vanity. All of the foolishness that was in my heart.
For this video, we're going to focus on a particular informal fallacy.
I'm your friendly neighborhood apostate apostle, J-Wit. I have been sent to bring good news to the poor, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, to open the prison to those who are bound in religion, anti-skeptical thought, and superstition. Okay, couple housekeeping things here, and then we'll jump right in. Make sure or be sure to like, if you're hearing my voice right now, they say every eye closed, every head bowed, every eye closed. Well, I need you to open your eyes and I need you to unbow your head. I need you to go to your computer, your laptop, your phone. I need you to use your opposable digit. That is your thumb. Perhaps if you're on your phone, to click that like button. Maybe even use your index finger. Hit like. And perhaps if you're feeling a little adventurous, go to the extra step and hit subscribe. And if you're even more adventurous still, share it. Okay? Well, with that said, let's jump right into today's episode of J-Wit Presents.
And I apologize. He apologized to everybody because it's not about one-upping anybody.
Yeah. I should preface this with saying that the he that he is referring to is Philipanthonymitchell. Those familiar with this channel will know that I am basically the antagonist to Philipanthonymitchell. You can call me the adversary of him. I'm here to basically utilize him as a tool, a vehicle for analyzing American evangelicalism. And I guess we have to say the shade of it, no pun intended, of the black version of it, that is. So I would say the black rendition of American evangelicalism. I'm utilizing him as a vehicle for exploration and analysis and critique of that particular sector of American evangelicalism. But many of the problems that it has are shared with the large. It's funny. This video was going to be largely about the ideas about collective punishment, the fallacy of composition. So what we're dealing with here, even in addressing Philipanthonymitchell so frequently, is, I wouldn't say it's the fallacy of composition, because I wouldn't say that everything that is true of him is true of the whole, but I would say that he is, like I like to say, paradigmatic of the larger state of American evangelicalism and Black evangelicalism in particular. There are certain salient features within evangelicalism, the tendency to go through crest, like you think of the crest of the wave or the summit of the mountain, and valleys, from peaks to valleys of various movements and revival. So what you'll have is you have the resurgence. Oh, we're coming back. We're going back. And this has been the history of American evangelicalism. I'm not going to get too long-winded with this, but throughout, going all the way back to Whitfield and Edwards, there is just a constant thread of revival, valley, peak, valley. And the internet may have hastened that or sped this whole process up some. But needless to say, we're in the middle of yet another one of these times in American history where people are flocking. Usually it is broken. If I can put on my prophetic hat, usually what ends up happening is at some point or other, there is some scandal and it breaks that momentum up. And then yet another person will be raised up before long. This has just been the flow. I mean, we look at Driscoll, you see what happened with him in Acts 29. I mean, he had the sort of momentum Philipanthonymitchell has times several tens, right? And then there was scandal and then it broke up. And, he's still active. He's still doing what he does, but not on the level and not with the same kind of visibility he had at one point. You see it with, Jim Baker, Jimmy Swagger. You see Tony Evans, even recently TD Jakes. I mean, all of these figures, all these characters in American evangelicalism, they represent you had Full Gospel Baptist Fellowship back in the day. You will see these people rise to prominence, usually through their great skill at oratory or some sort of feature of their charisma. And then they garner this huge following, Carlton Pearson. And then what ends up happening is some scandal of some sort happens. The momentum is broken, and then the stage is set for the arising of a new Messiah-like figure in American evangelicalism. For now, it seems that the new christened Messiah of American evangelicalism, at least particularly in the Black church, but it seems that he's starting to reach out. Its talons are reaching out even further. Is this philipanthonymitchell? So he is therefore a perfect vehicle for exploration of the problems that are endemic to this movement. All right, so let's continue to play this video.
And I apologize. He apologized to everybody because it's not about one-upping anybody.
Yeah.
And he really made.
Let's put his apology on really quickly.
I don't. First things first, a lot of the things I say about errors in pastoral ministry, I implicate my own self. First things first. If anybody will be honest before you critique me and judge me and listen to my preaching, don't just listen to a clip. Go watch a sermon or two. You will hear me implicating my own self. I talk about my own sin, my own struggles, my own failures. I air my own laundry from the pulpit. I don't shy away from that. I do that on purpose. I tell people, don't make me an idol. And I'm the first one to talk about my own brokenness from the pulpit so that people do not think that my preaching is from a place of self-righteousness. My preaching is more from a place of brokenness. That's number one. I implicate my own self. Number two, there are things I say about errors in pastoral ministry, and I also say I've made the same mistakes. And my preaching sometimes is misinterpreted for talking down to pastors. It's not me talking down to pastors. My heart crate, dang, boy, I'm about to cry.
You good, man.
I wish I could fast forward a little here, but unfortunately, I have to subject you to this.
You good, fam.
My bad, bro.
You good, fam. Don't apologize.
My heart, bro, is not to talk down to them, bro. My heart is to pull them out of the foolishness that I felt like I spent 10 years doing, bro. 2819 it will be 2 years old. 2819 was founded on January 2023. In January, we'll be 2 years old, bro.
Yes.
It's only in the last 2 years what God has wrung out of me, bro.
So he's saying so he's saying that he had been in existence for over 10 years, obviously, over a decade. But it's only in the last 2 years. These are the last two years of explosive growth for his movement, incidentally, that God has wrung the,
It's all of the vanity.
Vanity, that is.
All of the foolishness that was in my heart.
So he is admitting on this platform that for basically more or less a decade, he was leading people with foolishness and vanity in his heart. And they gave into the ministry. And I'm not going to criticize him necessarily for that, but this is his way of saying, hey, I'm down here with you guys. I'm not looking down on you. It's an important part of, it's important to understand the context of that apology on Lecrae's video on his channel here on YouTube so that you can understand.
I apologize. He apologized to everybody because it's not about one-upping anybody.
Yeah.
And, you know, he really made sure he meant to say that this is me too. I'm also responsible for this. I'm not perfect. I do things that I shouldn't do as well, but it's just more of like a urging. The reason it comes off like it sounds like that, and it made me think of us sometimes that people may see us that way, where it looks like we're especially about like, you know, certain passages. It may seem like we're doing this, but it's like no, it's coming from a place of like, come on, man. Like
it's out of fear.
Let's go. Let's go. We got to do better than this. Like what's happening? So it's not to say like if it ever comes off, and this is what he said, if it ever comes off like we're saying that we're better than any of these.
So notice the one gentleman on the left was trying to interrupt and say that the motivation was fear. I don't know how he was going to fill that out. I'm not omniscient, but he didn't stop and say, that's it. That's it. In summary, he keeps going on. And then another gentleman is about to interrupt. And that's going to be basically what this segment is going to feature of J-Wit. J-Wit presents.
People are we, there's something special about us. No, it's just looking. And I hear myself sometimes when I talk on the show and I'm like, and I sound like, what are we doing? I sound like that. It's not out of what are y'all doing? It's like, what are we doing? This is ridiculous. Why do
you see that? So that's him adopting the sentiments of philipanthonymitchell, who was saying, hey, I'm not pointing down, I'm not talking down or preaching at you. I'm acknowledging I spent a decade in this folly and vanity, etc. So I am this really, mind you, this is somewhat of a bifurcation fallacy, because you could still be very self-righteous if you felt like you used to be that way, but you're not that way now. But we won't go down that rabbit hole. We have another fallacy to attack today. Okay. We have the fallacy of composition on the table for today's, that is the fallacy du jour, right? Is the fallacy of composition. And we're not going to deal with all these, basically the ubiquitous bifurcation fallacy that seems to, I told you, this is more or less Philip Anthony Mitchell's pet fallacy. He seems to have a penchant for this one, but let's continue. So, but he's saying, hey, you know, I spent 10 years in it. I'm down here. I'm not trying to talk down at you guys. All right. So that's
think this way. You know what I mean?
It affects all of us. Like you look at the story when Joshua went to battle. And then Achan, he took the items after they said don't take nothing. He took when they went to that next battle, Achan just didn't get defeated. The whole kingdom of Israel got defeated.
Right.
And then they had to go back and they straightened the situation out the way they handled it. But what you saw was the impact of one man. What one man did affected the whole kingdom. So when these pastors get up here and they say stuff, crazy stuff on the pulpit of food, they don't just look at.
So what you have there is collective punishment tethered to the fallacy of composition. So this is a double whammy. It's wrong. I mean, collective punishment. Many of you are familiar with this when you be in school. This teacher tell you to be quiet. You're going to get a pizza party this Friday, but it's contingent on the cooperation of every student in the class. If one of you guys mouths off or is too loud, it's going to ruin it for the whole bunch. You guys will then, you know, let's say Troy, he mouths off. Okay. All right, no pizza party this Friday. Everybody's looking sour-faced at Troy because now we're all being punished for the actions of one person. That's collective punishment. We see it in war. It's basically a war crime at this point. We consider that to be unethical to punish all of the civilians, to carpet bomb the civilians while you're supposed to be fighting a battle or a war with another army. So the people bear the punishment, collective punishment. And what he's saying here is that in the story of Joshua 7, chapter 7, where there's the battle at Ai. At Ai, there's a small number of the troops of Joshua, of Israelites, who go down there. This is supposed to be this is supposed to be an open and shut case of a battle. It's not supposed to be a hard or difficult. So he's like, don't even send the whole army, just send a portion of them. They go down there, they get their butts whooped. They flee and defeat And so they were routed before their enemies. And obviously, because, the whole Bible is an ideology, um, there's obviously a reason, right? The reason is they're sent in a camp, right? So if there is lack of success temporally, we can look to some sort of obvious problem, some sort of sin, right? And the culprit turns out to be, after their rather kangaroo court type situation they set up, they find that it is indeed a man named Achan who had he had saved some of the spoils from battle for himself and buried them in his tent. And what he briefly refers to, this guy right here refers to, of course, they took care of it. I'm going to bring it back just a little.
What one man did affected the whole kingdom. So when these pastors get up here and they say,
No. See, I'm scared to go back too far because then it starts. We'll see if we can go back.
Right. And then they had to go back and they straighten the situation out the way they handled it. But
they had to go back and straighten the situation out. What he glosses over there, straightening the situation out and handling it, is identifying Achan as the person who's the traitor, who's the person who took spoils from war, and taking him. Well, let's just read the story and then we'll come back and finish this up. Joshua 7. Let's see. I can make this visible. And wish I could bring it to the fore. I'm going to have to bring them up later. So I guess I'll just read from 16 down. So 16, 1 through 15, they're dealing with the battle at AI, where they were routed by their enemies, and it becomes quite obvious to them through their ideological view of the world, that obviously something is wrong. We've sinned somehow. So they identify. Joshua goes to try to identify who the culprit is, right? So Joshua rose early in the morning and brought Israel near, tribe by tribe. And the tribe of Judah was taken. They don't tell you by, I guess, yeah. So he takes the tribe of Judah. This is going to be interesting because I don't know if they tell you exactly how he divined that Achan is the culprit. They just assume that he had some means of figuring this out, right? And he brought near the clans of Judah, and the clan of the Zerites was taken. How was the clan of the Zerites taken? Who knows, right? And he brought near the clan of the Zerites man by man. Actually, you know what? I think it does. I think the guy confesses just in truthfulness. It's kind of odd. But he brought near the clan of the Zerites man by man, and Zabdi was taken. And he brought near his household man by man. And Achan, the son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, was taken. Then Joshua said to Achan, my son, give glory to the Lord God of Israel and give praise to him. And tell me now what you have done. Do not hide it from me. And Achan answered Joshua, truly I have sinned against the Lord God of Israel, and this is what I did. When I saw among the spoil a beautiful cloak from Shinar and 200 shekels of silver and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, then I coveted them and took them, and see, they are hidden in the earth inside my tent with the silver underneath. So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran to the tent, and behold, it was hidden in his tent with the silver underneath. And he took them out of the tent and brought them to Joshua and to all the people of Israel. And they laid them down before the Lord, and Joshua and all Israel with him took Achan, the son of Zerah, and the silver and the cloak and the bar of gold and his sons and daughters and his oxen and donkeys and sheep and his tent and all that he had. And they brought them up to the valley of Achor. And Joshua said, why did you bring trouble on us? Okay, so why did you bring trouble on us? This is the idea of, I guess what we would call collective punishment. All right, so this is what he is saying, is that God has co-signed collective punishment. And we'll see issues with this when perhaps I'll get to it after we finish this passage reading this. But so he's brought trouble on them. How has he brought trouble on them? He's taken spoils from the war or the battle and hidden them in his tent. And because of that deed, other people have died. They lost a battle. They lost the battle in Ai. So he's brought trouble on the group by virtue of his own actions, right? You can see how underlying you almost can't have a certain kind of collective punishment without first capitulating to the fallacy of composition. That is to say, if a thing is true of the one part, is now some people might say, "Hey, that's not the case. They are just bearing it." Well, then you have the issue of if they're just bearing the punishment for the actions of one, how is that fair that they bear the punishment for one person's actions if they are indeed guilty? So you see, what I'm saying is, if according to the fallacy of composition, that which is true of one part is true of the whole, right? And what I'm saying is that has an inextricable connection to the idea of collective punishment, because how do you then punish a group based on the actions of one unless you feel like the group is implicated by the actions of one? And if you don't feel that to be the case, then how is that fair? And if we go to, was it Romans 3:26, I believe it is, where he says that God he intended to demonstrate his justice in the present time, because in the past he had overlooked previous sins, right? So he did it so as to be both the just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus. And the question then becomes, justifier before who? Before himself? No, justifier before other human beings. So it's some sort of divine command theory or whatever else kind of way you would try to weasel your way out of this, it won't do, because at least the God that Paul presents people, where people derive their soteriological scheme or their scheme of salvation, where they get that and derive it and glean it from, is a person who thinks that God, that is, Paul thinks God is interested in displaying his justice. In other words, not only having a justice that is tied to his ontology in such a way that anything that emanates from who he is just, but a justice that is seen to be just before sentient creatures, namely human beings. So when we speak of this situation and we say, well, this is unethical, right? It's unethical for an individual to then for an individual to do a thing that causes a whole group to suffer on the basis of that individual's deed, then I think this is a serious charge and it should be taken seriously. We should take seriously the fallacy of composition underlying that notion of justice, that is corporate or collective punishment, right? But let's keep going. So the donkeys in their case, so 8. Okay, so we'll just read 24 again. And Joshua and all Israel with him took Achan, the son of Zerah, and the silver, and the cloak, and the bar of gold, and his sons and daughters, and his oxen and donkeys and sheep, and his tent, and all that he had. So he's even taken inanimate objects. The tent is even guilty. Like, if we're going to collectively punish the sentient creatures, but we're also going to just arbitrarily just destroy things, right? They bear the guilt, right? And this isn't a notion that's exclusive to this passage. You see it in other passages where, I mean, there is an interesting passage where he says, don't hurt the trees. It's not like they did anything. And it seems a bit capricious in that context, because all the time do non-humans and things end up suffering destruction as a result of the thing, an action taken by a human being in the text. But these things are supposed to be devoted to destruction, right? So, but I guess, yeah, to be fair, I think what's said commanded to them was that they weren't to take any spoils from. All of the things were to be devoted to destruction. In a similar way, I've devoted this channel to critiquing Philipanthonymitchell, which, by the way, you guys should subscribe to, like, and share. But let's keep it going. And so they take him down, and he says, and all that he had, and they brought them up to the valley of Achor. And Joshua said, "Why did you bring trouble on us? The Lord brings trouble on you today." All right. And all Israel stoned him with stones. They burned them with fire and stoned them with stones. And they raised over him a great heap of stones that remains to this day. And the Lord turned from his burning anger. Therefore, to this day, the name of that place is called the Valley of Achor. So who knows if this is just an ideology that they gave for the naming of the place called the Valley of Achor. Maybe someone made this story up and said, well, it got its name because of this particular person who did this. But notice in verse 26, it says, then the Lord turned from his burning anger. So this is what I'm saying. The Lord is co-signing collective punishment here. First, there's the collective punishment of the people of Israel when they go to war for the actions of Achan, right? And then there's the collective punishment as you zoom in of Achan's family for the actions of Achan yet again. All right. So back to track stars.
And I apologize. He apologized to everybody because it's not
hopefully go here without it skipping.
We're doing this, but it's like no, it's coming from a place of like It's not to say like if it ever comes off.
Okay.
It's just looking, and I hear myself sometimes when I'm talking. What are y'all doing? It's like what are we doing?
The story when Joshua went to battle, and then Achan, he took the items after they said don't take nothing. He took when they went to that next battle. Achan just didn't get defeated. The whole kingdom of Israel got defeated.
So he's saying so when they went to Ai, the army lost the battle, right?
Right.
And then they had to go back and they straightened the situation out the way they handled it. But what you saw was the impact of one man. What one man did affected the whole kingdom. So when these pastors get up here and they say crazy stuff on the pulpit of food, they don't just look at that one man. A lot of times these folks say, look at these Christians. That's how they act. Look at all these folks talking about they're Christian, they got it. It affects all of us. It affects how people view God, more importantly.
That's right.
It's people who don't want to serve God because they heard some foolishness in the pulpit or somebody's grandma got robbed for all their money for years. And they're like, man, they hustle my.
So he's saying God is even implicated. So he's saying that this fallacy of composition, and he's not, so you see, he says, have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them, right? The New Testament says. So instead of reproving fallacious reasoning, you capitulate it and adopt it. You validate it by capitulating to it. Instead of saying, look, that's actually not the way. We're not going to apologize for every Christian that has ever done anything wrong, even if we have no connection to that. We're going to capitulate to the idea that the fallacy of composition, that if one part of us has a characteristic trait, then all of us share it, right? And not only do we capitulate to that, but even God himself has to be implicated by the actions of some Christian. That's what this man is claiming. And this is all to offer up an apologetic for Philipanthonymitchell, who some have deemed to be condemning or self-righteous and talk. So they're saying, yeah, go ahead.
Out all her money. Why I want to go down there and worship a God that they say they serve if they acting like this? Like your God, your character, like your integrity, that stuff matters.
Yeah. So he's saying, and all of this argument is being made. So he brings us to Joshua 7 to this horrible story of I don't know, basically capital punishment is both capital punishment and collective punishment, because you have them being killed, but it's a collective administering of capital punishment, and they're dying for something they didn't do, that their father, for instance, or the ox are getting stoned and then burned. This is crazy. So he takes us to this wild episode where you see one of the dark underbelly of Yahweh, where Yahweh's appeased by this. He turns away. They burn them, they stone them and burn them, and then his anger which was kindled and burning, it subsides. You see, there's almost like a poetic kind of mirroring going on there, where by virtue of putting them to death and burning them, his anger is quenched and he is no longer burning in wrath against them, right? You think this is an episode that, generally speaking, you don't want to shine a light on something like that. If you're a thinking person, you see what's going on. But now let's look at a little what this means. Let's see. What is the fallacy of composition that I've been referring to? The definition is, it occurs when one argues that something must be true of the whole because it is true of some parts of the whole. And then they give you an example. Trees are made of atoms, and atoms are not visible to the eye. Therefore, see, this is true argumentative form. You have a proposition, right? Trees are made of atoms, and atoms are not visible to the eye. Then you have a therefore clause, a proposition that's made on the basis of the previous one. It's dependent on it. Therefore, trees are not visible to the eye either. Now, that's clearly not true. And this is an informal fallacy because the argument is in proper form, but it's the content of the argument is not correct. We're going to get into that really quickly in this video, and then we'll close out. But let's look at this in this video here.
Hello, I'm Paul Henney, and I'm a philosophy graduate student at Duke University. And in this video, I'm going to talk to you about a particular informal fallacy called the fallacy of composition. In doing this, I'm also going to tell you why there aren't colorless cats, but I'll get to that idea in a second. To recall, an informal fallacy is an argument whose premises do not support its conclusion. Generally, a fallacy is a defect in reasoning, and there are two types of fallacies, formal and informal. A formal fallacy is an argument with an...
By the way, I didn't give credit to Trackstars. They are the guys from the previous clip, and I think I gave the shout out to Lecrae, who's in it. Actually, the interview was pretty good. It's an interesting interview. It's worth checking out Lecrae's video. Trackstars, I can't say much from them. I've seen some of their content. I believe they do Christian content. But yeah, check their video out too. It's there. Trackstars with a Z in this one word. Trackstars with a Z. All right. So they're getting into this fact that this is an informal fallacy. We need to make sure you guys are clear on what that is. Let's see.
A formal fallacy is an argument with an error in the form of the argument.
Okay, so you have correct form for arguments. And, this video is from Wireless Philosophy on YouTube. They have a great channel. I've subscribed. You should subscribe there too. But so formal fallacies are fallacies or fallacious reasoning that is based in incorrect form.
Informal fallacy contains an error in the content of the argument. But you can...
So an informal fallacy, where this fallacy falls underneath, this fallacy of composition is informal. It has to do with the content of the argument. So the form's right, but the content's wrong. He's going to go
more
on
about this distinction in the video about informal and formal fallacies, which should be out soon. For this video, we're going to focus on a particular informal fallacy.
Yes.
So the fallacy of composition is an error in reasoning that arises in the content of an argument. People commit this error when they draw conclusions about the whole from truths about its constituent parts without having a justification for doing so. That is, they think, without justification, that what is true of the parts of something must also...
So you see how the brother said, God is implicated, you are implicated, and he's saying that on the basis of, he's implicated by the actions of some wild preacher somewhere saying false stuff. And so and on the basis of that, Philipanthonymitchell has to critique that. He has to call that out. He has to speak out against it, because this is what will happen. Instead of saying to your audience, look, that's improper reasoning. It's fallacious in nature. That's the fallacy of composition. Instead, he does what I call capitulating to it. He adopts it. He surrenders himself to that line of reasoning, which is false. So like I said, rather than reproving it, he capitulates to it. And then he uses it as a reason for offering up an apologetic for Philipanthonymitchell's particular John the Baptist style of preaching, right?
Be true of the whole those parts compose. Sounds problematic, right? But let's represent this logical error more formally. Reasoning would be something like this. Premise 1. The parts of whole A have qualities X, Y, and Z.
All right. False teaching, right?
Conclusion 1. Therefore, whole A must have qualities X, Y.
Therefore, that's an excuse for a person to not go to church because they ripped off their grandmother, right?
And Z. The argument seems attractive, but the style of argument is like saying that because the states have some set of qualities, then the entire nation must have those qualities. You may now be able to see what's wrong with this line of reasoning. Without sufficient justification, we cannot infer that the whole has the same qualities as its parts.
Exactly. But interestingly enough, and like I said, rather than watching the entirety of this video, I don't want to beat the dead horse of explaining this fallacy. I'll just say that when you go to Joshua, which is interesting how this, I believe he was a preacher or something, so it may be a lay person, he drags God into this. He says, so to justify his apologetic for Philipanthonymitchell's John the Baptist style preaching, he uses the Bible and he uses Joshua 7, where God seemingly in verse 26 says, then the Lord turned from his burning anger. What? He turns from his burning anger after collective punishment is administered to Achan's family. And Achan, right? That appeases him. And with Achan, his actual sin, so-called sin, caused the Israelites as a whole to suffer loss in battle. So he's saying that passage legitimizes Philip Anthony's approach, because if this is the case, if you can implicate any number of parts on the basis, or if you can implicate the entire whole on the basis of any number of parts of it, then he's justified in being very radical, calling out parts so that the blame and the guilt doesn't fall on the whole. And he's saying he's finding that reasoning here in Joshua. And if you think about it, he's saying that the person on that podcast that I played, Track Stars, I
apologize. He apologized to everybody.
But the person on this podcast who says this, he's making his argument from God. He's saying this is how God reasons. If you think about it, he says it wasn't just him who suffered, it was all the people of Israel. Suffered at the hands of who? At the hands of God. God judged them for one person. So he's saying, so you see how I think Brady calls it Bible rot that happens? Well, here you have a fallacious line of reasoning that's derived directly from the way God actually reasons. Apparently, in verse 26, when the Lord's anger, he turned from his burning anger because they burned up Achan and his kids. He's seeing that as grounding his reasoning. So, yeah, it's interesting that I started studying logic while a Christian in order to defend my faith. And then when I found things like this, these things made me aware of the fact that it was just great inconsistency. And like I said, you can't really get out of it. Like I said, if you go to Romans 3, I think it's Romans 3:26, where it talks about him being both just and a justifier. Him displaying his righteousness in the death of Christ, so that the sins wouldn't just be overlooked, but they would be handled in a just way, and that was visible to human beings. It doesn't suffice to just say just anything he does becomes definitionally right because he did it. Because in a passage like that, he's making it apparent that he wants you to see what he's doing to be just. And when we see this, and we see people being collectively punished, we see him employing this sort of composite fallacy where the fallacy of composition, it should raise questions. I think the episode is long enough now, and lest I bore you with this, I'll just give you the rundown of the people featured in this video clip. That is Trackstar, the channels that is. Trackstars is featured with a Z. We feature Lecrae, who has a podcast, and we also feature a clip from Wireless Philosophy. You should go check out all of those videos. I particularly recommend subscribing to Wireless Philosophy, and be sure to click like and subscribe and to share this video as I try to grow this channel and help people see some of the reasoning that helped me to get out of the prison of religion. Thank you very much.